Three, two, one. Hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. Hey, listen, I got a really great question this week to start out with. One that I think you'll resonate with, and we're going to unpack this today. And the question is, how important is it for people to actually know you? And then we can actually work off of how important is it for people to know your company? How important is it for people to know your brand? And so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. I'm honored to be hanging out with Jonathan Rivera, also known as JR. How are you, buddy?
Brother, I am stoked to be here and I can't wait to get into it with you.
Awesome. Well, hey, get into it with me in a good way, because sometimes getting into it with somebody
It'll be entertaining. It'll be
yeah,
entertaining.
fisticuffs. Holy cow, that didn't take long. So, JR, man, thanks for hanging out with us today. You're the founder of the Podcast Factory. So, kind of fill us in on what's going on over there at the Podcast Factory.
Oh man, it's a perfect fit for your show where we're all about growth. In fact, one of our core values at the company, one of the things that we judge our team by and our clients by is growth. It's in our mission statement even. And so I'm honored to be here, but the whole thing was built on the idea of growth, personal growth, business growth, where I was fortunate enough to have some good friends, some good mentors, some good people who helped me during hard times and helped me get focused, helped me grow. And I thought, man, wouldn't it be amazing if I could tape? All right, so I'm dating myself here, but record.
Eight-track tape there, JR, or what? Are we going to go cassette route today?
I was thinking cassette, but
okay.
yeah. So
yeah, I dated myself there right there, so you're good.
If we could record these conversations and other people could listen, and that was the nucleus. That was the nucleus that formed what the Podcast Factory is today, where we have, I don't know, we've helped over 100 experts get their message out there, connect with more people, build bridges from the podcast to the phone to make sales. And so, yeah, I mean, it started with that and now it's turned into a business, but it's all based on growth, personal development, getting better.
That's awesome. And we love talking about that intersection of personal growth and business growth. So that's what we're going to jump into today. I think it's interesting, though. I want to kind of start with the question that I asked is, there's a bunch of entrepreneurs and business owners around the world that listen to this podcast. And, typically a business, an entrepreneur, growth is really important to them. And part of that growth is actually being able to have people know you. Now, it's not like you're going to walk through a airport and be like, oh my gosh, there's JR. How many people do that on a consistent basis? Maybe for you a lot. I don't have that, I don't have that problem of media following me around. But we need certain people, i.e. customers, prospects, we need to be visible to those people. And I think podcasting is one of the great ways to do it. Now, oddly enough, last year, Procter and Gamble spent $4.6 billion in getting their name out. Now, I'm guessing most people on this call today don't have 4.6 billion, that they want to invest in getting that message out. So I think podcasting is major growth happening right now. And so I encourage the listeners today to, two things: consider a podcast for yourself, but also consider being a guest on a podcast. So if somebody was in one of those two camps, JR, where do you kind of jump in and help those people get to that next step?
Well, I want to go back to the question that you opened with about people knowing you. And that's, I'm going to say, and bear with me here. We're not going to get into fisticuffs, but I'm going to say that I used to think that. And in fact, a lot of people come to us looking for that. I need to get my name out there.
Sure.
That is the thought process. And that's only because people don't know any better. They heard that and they think that's the way it works.
Sure.
And I would argue now, 15 years into being an entrepreneur, that getting your name out there and people knowing you might not be as important as it once was, because people are trying to focus on getting their name out there. And I say it's more important to get people's names in here. And when I
Hmm.
say in here, I'm talking about a certain type of marketing. We practice direct response marketing, and we're marketing to one person at a time. And we're looking at not building a huge audience, but we're looking at connecting with the exact right person. And
Sure.
so my obsession from the beginning is not, it's not always about getting your name out there, or who knows you. It's about who you know, right? Who do you know? Who can you
Right.
pick up the phone and call right now and they'll pick up? And
Sure.
I've spent a lifetime cultivating these relationships where I can pick up a phone and call somebody very important that might not be accessible to other people. But all of that came through podcasting. And so it just really depends. Are you trying to be Joe Rogan and get sponsors? Or are you just trying to build a comfortable business with clients that you care about and you want to grow with? And I'm
Sure.
more about growing with my clients.
And that's awesome. And I think that's a great starting spot to kind of clarify the reason that you're doing it, because to your point, you can do it one of two ways, get sponsors, get a bunch of names out there, win the accolades, or you can dial into people that really need the service that you have. So, I think that's a great place to start, is really to, be able to identify why you're doing this. I'm assuming most people then that come to you, you may have to give them that little course correction, but then they realize that, hey, I want to speak to X, whatever X is. You kind of unpack that with them, and then you find ways to get in front of that person. Is that a simple version of that?
Yeah, we're in our third iteration. Look, we've been doing this. I mean, I did my first podcast in '08. I opened the podcast factory in 13. And through that time, we've been through several different iterations of how we use the tool, because
Sure.
I consider podcasting a business tool. You don't, like, to me, it's offensive if somebody calls me a podcaster. I'm like, what? No, you're a podcaster. I'm not a podcaster. I'm a businessman who uses a podcast
Sure.
to grow
Yep.
my business. And those are the people that we serve. And so this iteration where we are right now, the third iteration, is really about getting laser focused on who we want to talk to. And we
Sure.
have a system called the client cartels, which is different than anything you might have ever seen in podcasting, because while other companies are going to sell you on more downloads, more subscribers, more reviews, woo, more likes,
Yep.
take a like to the bank
Yeah.
and see what they give you.
Exactly.
It
Yep.
doesn't mean anything. What we're focused on is the bottom line. And what I like to say is conversations equal opportunities. All of us have to sell whatever we're doing, coaching, consulting, service providers. We have to sell. And in
Yep.
order to sell, we have to talk to people. And talking to people is a matter of a conversation. So, what we're doing today with the client cartels is lining up your calendar with the exact perfect client who needs your help right now and setting up that conversation for you. The
Sure.
podcast is just a piece that comes off of that. That's like shrapnel, right? The main thing is that conversation. Like you're focusing everything on that conversation with that person. The podcast just happens to be a nice to have and a
Sure.
tool to get you that conversation.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I tell you, shrapnel, fisticuffs, cartel, this is like starting off in a really positive way. I love it. So no worries. It's not going to get any worse. It would have gotten worse though if I would have called JR a podcaster. So I'm so glad that I didn't do that. So holy cow, I'm honored that I got one right. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And I think business growth for you, how did that start? I mean, some people, I love that. I love the thought process. Some people are in corporate America, they hate their job and then they jump into owning their own business. Some people knew it since they were like 10 years old. There's no right or wrong way to making that transition into, entrepreneurship. How did it start for you, JR?
Oh, I didn't really have a choice. I became unemployable, and I was a blue collar worker. So I used to be an electrician, and I
Okay.
realized that I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't making the contribution that God put me on this earth for. And I had to figure out where I would find that, and it certainly wasn't at a job site.
Sure.
And what I did was I studied real estate. I started investing in real estate. I made a lot of money, lost it all, rebuilt again. And after I rebuilt the real estate business or began to rebuild it, I started looking at diversification because all my income was tied to the real estate. And when it all went downhill, I had nothing. And
Sure.
so the second thing I found was um, online business and doing things online. And that was, I don't know, 2008. So I started figuring out, all right, so how do you do online business? And at that time, there was a lot of talk, and people still talk about it today about being a thought leader. But back then, when you were a thought leader, you had to have a blog and you had to write. That did not work for me. I
Sure.
wasn't a good writer at the time. I barely made it out of high school English. So that wasn't going to work. And I found podcasting and I used podcasting to build more and more businesses. At that time, it was a real estate training business. Then I built my second real estate training business off of a podcast. Then I started showing other people how to do it. So we could build up businesses and we had partnerships and all that. So we kept building businesses off the back of a podcast.
Sure.
And it became, I realized, well, maybe the podcasting is a business. And that's when 2015 came along. And I said, all right, so we're going to do the Podcast Factory Agency. And Cupcake, my wife, and I just went all in on it.
Awesome. Well, I tell you what, I hope your English teacher is listening right now, JR, because I'm sure he or she would be happy on how you turned out, even though it might have took you, it took, some of us didn't graduate in 4 years. Let's just leave it at that. So, but you were you barely graduated high school. Like you said, you were in that spot. And I totally get that because I was in that spot too. There were way more things on my list that were more important than showing up for class. But something must have transitioned, something must have happened to you to go from there to success. So can you identify what that was? Was it an easy thing? Oh yeah, I can tell you right away, or was it something more progressionary?
No, I mean, I'll share it. I'm supposed to share the path, right? So what I didn't talk about earlier was I was an electrician because my parents told me, hey, when you get out of school, get a trade. You'll have something to fall back on.
Yeah,
That language, that programming was the best they knew. I don't hold it against them, but I know
sure.
that's not good programming. Fall back on. But I did what they said. I became an electrician, got a trade, became a journeyman, ran jobs, had crews, had the van, had all that. Um, about 9 years in, my mom passed away. And one of the last conversations I had with her was about all the stress she had at work.
Sure.
And that always stayed with me. Like that's what she's thinking about at the end. I'm like, I can't do it. I I just became very depressed, obviously, lost my mom.
Yeah,
And for 2 years I didn't really do well at my job, but I was barely scraping by and I had to get out. And so that's when I saw real estate as the way out.
sure.
And I got my license, started selling real estate, started investing, and rebuilt a new life, a new trajectory, and new purpose.
Wow. So a recovering electrician and real estate agent all in one. So congratulations that you were able to make it through that, you know. But I think it's interesting in that on that note, because there are people listening right now, JR, that are like, man, I'm totally envious of that. I wish that I had something to not fall back onto, but fall into, in a positive way. Where how do I, maybe I have this idea, maybe I don't. I just know that what I don't want. I mean, how did podcasting, I know you kind of touched on it, but with all the different things going on in the world, how did podcasting really come to the surface for you?
Well, it goes back to my stellar grades in school. So clearly, if I wasn't writing, I probably wasn't reading much.
Yeah,
And when I got into the real estate thing, I joined a real estate investment group, and they would have seminars and trainings and all that kind of jazz going on. And one of my friends in one of the groups introduced me to something called Audible. Oh, books on my iPod. This is
sure.
amazing. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm a reader now. And eventually doing that, led me to find podcasting because I learned I didn't even know the word entrepreneur at that time. Like I didn't know that word. I didn't know what the word marketing was and
Right.
all these new concepts that were coming to me as I was reading Seth Godin. I started looking for more content on these topics and I found podcasting and then I realized, wow, but podcasting really changed my life because I remember one of the first podcasts I subscribed to was Internet Business Mastery, and they were talking about you could have a business online and landing pages and pay per clicks and all this. And I just expanded my mind. And so when I found those podcasts, I started just listening and listening and listening and trying to
Yeah.
apply what I was learning and trying to understand. And when it came time for me to do my work, it was natural that I'm not going to write. It's not going to happen. I'm not
Sure.
writing a book or anything, but I can talk.
Yeah.
And dude, if you listen to my first podcast, they were horrible. They were just plain, but at least I did it. And so the
Yeah.
people that are out there
Yeah.
saying, I wish I could, or maybe I might, let me tell you something. Right now, we're in a really, really great place where you can have an idea, you can get online and you can test that idea and see people will pay you for it. And it
Sure.
happens so quickly and it's so amazing, but
Yeah.
so many people don't do anything about it.
Right. Wow. And that's the thing is I think you were there was a crossroads there that I'm hearing where you could have either gone down the road of fall back into this, or you can go into something where there's like a dream that you had, and I think it's interesting if you surround yourself with successful people, it's really hard not to be successful. And if you surround yourself with negativity or settling for second best, whatever that looks like, it's really hard to get out of that as well. And so I think a lot of business growth has to do with making sure that you have the right group around you. So you are fortunate to have somebody around you that kind of introduced you to podcasting. And then at that spot, you really took on, and you took off with that. So congratulations. Excuse me, it's real easy for us to get stuck every day. And this is as good as it's going to get. I'm working 50 weeks a year for my 2 weeks of vacation, right? There's that is there. And especially if you look at today's news, oh my gosh, this would be the worst time to start a new business or whatever, right? You can talk yourself out of that a lot. And we talk a lot about the comfort zone because a lot of people are in the comfort zone. They want to get to the growth zone, but there's this piece in between that's called the fear zone. I mean, did you have fear in starting this up? How did, I mean, there must have been something there that was like trying to talk you out of it, wasn't there?
Bro, I shaved my head because all the grays in here.
I just dye mine. It's way easier than shaving it. So,
Oh man. But yeah, there's the thing is, one of my mentors likes to say, new levels, new devils. And I'm gonna lay it out for you right now. The fear never goes away. The fear is gonna be there. New levels, new devils. You are gonna hit fear no matter what. And the difference between the people who live extraordinary lives and do amazing things and make an impact and leave their mark on the world versus average ordinary people is that we harness the fear. We use the fear. The fear is an indicator that perhaps you're on the right spot. And certainly you have to learn to read it. Sometimes you're going to get pummeled, and sometimes you're going to have the biggest breakthrough of your life.
yeah.
But some people could be in that comfort zone, which is basically comfort prison, or you can start getting uncomfortable intentionally so that you grow towards your destination, towards your purpose.
Yeah, that's really great. And I think there's a lot of people that you have to pay a price, right? In order to get through that fear, you have to pay a price. And quite frankly, not everybody wants to pay that price. And we're not here to say you have to do anything. So, if you choose to live and work and do it that way, and you're cool with, working 50 weeks a year in the company and a couple weeks to yourself or whatever that looks like, we're not here trying to tell anybody to quit their job. I'm talking to the person that has this light that's inside of them that wants to do something different, wants to do something better, wants to, like you said, leave your mark on this world. And, however big of mark it is or however small a mark it is, it's still a mark. And so, I think that's the other trap. I know for myself, if I can't do, JR, the biggest mark, if I can't have the number one podcast in the world, then I'm not going to do it. It's like we always are, and not that that's not a bad place to want to get to, but I think it stops us from ever starting. And so I know for myself, I started my podcast in May of 2020 when everything was shutting down. And I started it simply because I wanted to communicate with people in a way that was new, and I was new to Zoom. So I'm like, well, let's just have a conversation. I just want to talk to people. And then I'm like, well, shoot, as long as I'm going to talk to them, I might as well record it. And to your point, I'm like, as long as I'm recording it, I might as well see if anyone else wants to listen to it. Right. And so, whatever that looks like for the listener, or the viewer, I just want to make sure that you're not settling in that spot. And I mean, do you struggle with that? I'm here, I'm settling. Do you struggle with that settling, or is there always this desire to keep pushing forward?
I'm on the other side of the spectrum. Rather than settling, it's like I'm constantly unsatisfied,
Okay.
and not in an unhealthy way. But I think that to your point, when you talked about I want to have the number one podcast, that's just a matter of shifting perspective. Instead of being the number one podcast everywhere, I want to
Yeah.
have my best podcast episode today. My best discussion. Was this discussion better than the discussion I had yesterday,
Yep.
last week, last month?
Yep.
And so always, always, always remember that the comparison should only be to yourself and
Yep.
who you
That's
are today and who
fantastic.
you were yesterday. And that's one of the biggest things. And that's why I'm constantly not satisfied, because I want to be a better version of myself every single day. And that's what I told you from the beginning. What's the Podcast Factory Network about? We're about growth. I was not just saying that because I was coming on your show. I
Yeah.
mean, I live this.
Yeah.
This is real. And
Yeah.
so, constant life of growth is constantly looking at what you've done, looking at what you have failed to do, looking at what you can do better.
Wow. Well, and so there is a guy that just called me out on something, and I have to fess up that I struggle in that comparison trap. What you just said is exactly, rather than, what you said of, is today's podcast better than last week's? Are you on that trajectory to move forward personally, or are you comparing yourself to somebody else? And I struggle with that, Jer, all the time. And I'm like, how did they do this? How did they get this? How did they do that? How did, and it's like, fortunately, it's not like a paralyzing thing for me. It does affect me, but doesn't like, screw it, I'm going home. It doesn't cause me to do things that I shouldn't do. It's constantly in the back of my mind. And I'm thinking that, you're pointing out that I need to be focusing more on myself than, on others. And I think that's a great message for any entrepreneur listening. If you're trying to get better so that you can be like your number one competitor, or you can beat them out, or whatever, if there's something there, take it for what it's worth, because those are really kind but harsh words. But thank you. That's why we do this, because if it was all like, oh my gosh, this is great, life is great, we don't have to learn anything, then we'd never have the fear zone. So I appreciate that. um, you talk about building your brand and growing your audience and getting more clients, and one of the ways that you do it is, through podcasting. Are there other business growth strategies that you're working on, at the Podcast Factory for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. And we touched on it earlier, and it's worth repeating and diving into a little bit deeper. Is the relationship game and relationship capital,
Okay.
and who you know, and who knows you. Both are important. But yeah, if I could give myself some advice, like 20-year-old JR, Number one would be shut up and listen. I talk too much. That's a no brainer. I think most of us could use that advice at a young age. But the other one is, I think it's Jim Rohn who said you are the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And I would give my younger self the advice to audit who I'm hanging out with and
Wow.
making sure that I'm hanging out with people like you said who lift you up. You said there was two types of people earlier. There are people that get down into the funk and want to bring you down with them, and then there's people that are flying high and want to give you a hand up. And
Right.
you got to notice the difference between those two crowds, and you got to eliminate as many of those naysayers. And I'm going to tell you right now, some of them are going to be your family.
Yeah.
Some of them are going to be people you grew up with. They could be your clergy. I don't
Right.
know,
Yeah.
but they mean well. But that doesn't mean that they're going to help you. And so you got to find those people. And this is one of the things I learned, and how I actually launched the podcast factory as an agency is I got into a high level mastermind. I was paying more than I thought I could afford, and it was freaking us out. And it was the biggest investment I ever made in my environment, and it was the best investment I had ever made by paying to be in this room with these people that were doing big things, talking about all the work that they're doing and asking questions that I didn't even know to ask, and getting around those people who want you to do better. And I think that's where really the most amazing growth that you can have is surrounding yourself with the right people. Now there's the objection. Well, I can't afford a mastermind, or I don't know where to find them, or I don't know how to pick them.
Sure.
Okay. Well, you're doing it right now with Dave
Right.
Melinda. You're in an environment of growth with somebody sharing positive messages. You go to the library and you can pick up books from Rockefeller, Napoleon Hill, whatever. You can
Sure.
start there. Start where you can
Yeah.
and work your way up. But environment is the biggest one. Who you know and who knows you.
Wow. Audit who you're hanging out with. What a smart piece of information. And I know for myself, JR, I tend to want to find people that need help because that's I'm a coach. So it's like you naturally are trying to find people that need help. And I have to be careful because I don't want to get I don't want to this isn't going to sound right, but I'm going to say it. I don't want to come to their level. I want them to come up to mine, right? And that sounds horrible. So please don't email me. I heard it myself. I've said it, okay? But I'm trying to say I want people to become more positive. I want people to become more empathetic. I want people to be more vulnerable. That's what I think of when I talk about coming up, where people can just be open. I mean, shoot, I've already been called out a couple times, on this. And it's like, you know what? I could either go, oh my gosh, that's totally not me, JR. That's somebody else. Or I confess up and say, yeah, that's me. And now let's grow from that. And I think that that's amazing information. The other piece that you talked about is that momentum. And I think somebody told me once, and I forgot what it was, but the amount of energy it takes to start a train is like unbelievably amazing amount of it, but to keep it actually moving forward is not that hard to do. And so, if you have to start, if your momentum starts by listening to a podcast or going to the library or whatever, finding your company probably has an association you belong to. They probably have some kind of, free group that gets together. I mean, we offer free groups pretty regularly. Most places you can find a group where there are positive people that want to encourage you. So I totally love that, start somewhere piece, whatever, however simple. I remember I went to the library probably 5, 10 years ago, and I didn't even have a library card, and I'm like, well, I keep buying books and I'm not reading them. So I should probably start, at least reading it at the library. If I like the first couple pages, then you know what, it makes sense. So whatever that momentum start looks like for you, do you remember what started you on that entrepreneur journey? Was there some piece that just was like, I can't do this anymore?
Yeah, when I went into, and this goes back to environment actually. I'm glad that you're asking this, and I'm glad we have a chance to talk about it, is when I went into the real estate thing. Remember, I told you I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't even know the word entrepreneur. I didn't know that
Yeah,
I was an entrepreneur. All I knew was I had to get away from the 7 to 3:30 grind as an electrician, and I jumped into this real estate thing. And they did. They had training. Of course, they had training there. So I
yeah,
took the training. More importantly than the training, I was in an office with people who were producing, and a couple people took a shine to me.
yeah,
And that's where I figured out the whole mentorship thing. Like,
yeah,
hey, come over here and help us. You want to help us do this? You want to help us do that? And then I could ask them questions and I could do things for them. But the idea was who knew me and who I knew. It was a person that, or they were a team and they were doing deals and they wanted to help me and they wanted to mentor me. And that's what I've been looking for my whole life, is a progression of mentors for where I am and where I want to go. And so that's how I end up in masterminds. That's how I end up making relationships. That's how I end up running my whole business, is back to that relationship capital. Who do we know? Who knows us? And seeking out mentorship from people who are doing things that I want to do, and me being able to offer. That's how the podcast factory started. There was guys that I learned email marketing from, copywriting from, all these great skills. And I said, hey, dude, you taught me so much. What do you think about us getting on, recording? Because I know how to do this podcast thing, and maybe we could share this. And that,
sure.
remember, I told you it started out with JV, so I wasn't charging at that time. I
Yeah,
got with my mentors, I got them to do a podcast with me, and then we did joint ventures together. But it was seeking out the right environment of people doing things that I wanted to do, and then having something to give to them. The
yeah.
podcast.
That's awesome. Well, and I tell you, the relationship game is a big, relationship capital. Those are really big buzzwords right now. And I am trying to encourage people in that situation to always be the one to start by, hey, who do you need to know? Rather than, we've all been in that spot, yeah, where somebody calls you and say, hey, do you know this person? Can you introduce me to this person? Blah, blah, blah. And it's all about them. I don't want to be that person. I want someone to be, I want to say, hey, who do you need to know? Who can I help you rather than me saying, hey, JR, introduce me to so and so. I think it's way more effective and way more powerful and way more positive to say, hey, JR, who are a couple people that you'd love to get introduced to? And maybe I know them, maybe I don't. Obviously, it works differently if it's local versus national, but I love to encourage people to start the relationship game, that capital, by actually giving rather than receiving. So I'm assuming that's what you're, suggesting as well. But I could, this, we could get to fisticuffs here yet. So what's your take on that?
You nailed it. I put it a little well, I get a little cheeky with these sometimes. I remember when we were looking for preschools for my son, we went to this one and we loved it. It was great. It was beautiful. We were ready to sign up, and then when we get towards the end, they're showing us this lesson, the lesson plan for the month or whatever. What the big values thing that they're trying to teach the kids, and most people would have loved that. It's better to give than receive. That's what
Yeah,
it said on the wall. And I looked at that and I said, "We're out of here." And my wife's like, "What?" Cupcakes. Like, what do you mean? I said, we're out of here. These people are socialist. What? Yeah, because it's better to receive than give. You got to be able to fill your cup so that you have an overflow, so that you're able to be generous. You have to take care of yourself first so that you're strong and you're ready to take care of the people around you. And so, yeah, I'm a little weird about it, but we have to take care of ourselves. We have to be a little selfish.
absolutely. That's cool. And somehow being in business is all about balance, right? And there's days that you're there and there's days that you're in different spots. So it's awesome to have different perspectives on that. I just know for me, early in my career, I was at a networking event, JR, and a guy, I don't know who he was. So fortunately, I can't even, put a name with a face, but he walks up to me, never met the guy before. And he literally had a half inch of cards of his own business cards. Never met the guy. I'm going to call him Mike. Who knows? Mike comes up to me and says, hey, my name's Mike. I work for, Mike's Printing, whatever. He's and never met the guy before. And he's like, here's my cards. Would you please hand these out to all your friends?
What?
And it was just like, whoa, dude, and I'm just like, this is crazy. Number one, I don't know you. Number two, I don't trust you. And number three, now I'm supposed to do your networking and your marketing for you. I mean, it was so awkward. And then that just kind of rubbed me in such a wrong way where I'm like, hey, don't ever, I don't even like walking up. I don't even like when people walk up to me and give me their business card because it's just such an awkward. I don't know. I'm like, do I got something in my teeth? Do I need to, get that piece of parsley out of there? What's going on? What am I going to do with this card? As a lead, obviously eventually down the road, yes, but relationship capital is like, holy cow, what's going on, Jer? What is going on in your life? Tell me some great stuff. I got some great stuff to share. If you start that way, I think you end up way more in a positive spot. And that's, I think, where growth happens, in that great environment. I love that word environment that you used. So I don't know if you have any stories of like freak out things, but that was just so weird for me to have a guy literally walk up with a half inch of cards. And of course I'm going to be like, okay, but am I going to do it? Heck no. I mean, I can't say no to the guy. Maybe today I'd be like, dude, you need to invest in a course on this or something. But, so I don't know if you've ever had any of those odd things happen to you.
I'm with you. I mean, I like I said, I was getting cheeky with the story, but one
Yeah.
of my lifetime goals is to be more generous, and I do believe that the only way you can be generous is if you take care of yourself. But
Right.
that's our whole thing with the client cartels and the results leader show is I'm giving our guest a platform. I'm giving our guest an opportunity to experience our system. I'm giving them some marketing materials they can use afterwards. So I'm starting our relationship because we have to get clients, but I'm
Sure.
starting from a place of giving. And
Sure.
I'm 100% with you. I want to be more generous. And when you come from a place of generosity, it helps you fuel everything else you do. And that's one of the reasons I'm never satisfied because if I want to give more, I need to have more. And it's just a recurring cycle of I want to give to the church, I want to give to the school, I want to give to my
Sure.
clients, whatever it is. I have to keep pushing so that I can give to the places and people that matter to me.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. So what as we start to come in for landing today, what podcasts are you hosting right now? What are some of those that you have going on?
I host resultsleader.fm.
Okay.
And there we're talking about thought leadership is easy, results leadership is hard, and we're all about results. So that's my main project. Every once in a while, maybe once a month or so, I do a daddy's working, just kind of behind the scenes of what's going on in the podcast factory. But yeah, resultsleader.fm is my main gig right now.
Excellent. That's awesome. And that's interesting because like for me, when I created Positive Polarity 10 years ago, I everyone's like, so, what does it mean? What is it? I mean, and everybody has these ideas on what your mission statement should be, what your vision, all this stuff. And I basically had three words, and I said business growth, period, and then manifested, period, because I didn't want it just to be business growth and then, hey, here's a bunch of great concepts, let me know how that works for you. I want to not only have those, but then I want that to manifest into what it is that you want your growth to look like. So we're totally on the same page on that. That's fantastic. So couple questions, then I'm going to let you go. What would Jonathan Rivera's tip of the week be for anyone listening?
Let's just go back to God gave us one mouth and two ears for a reason. Let's all try to listen more and listen intentionally to hear what the other person is saying, and I think we'd have a whole better life.
Wow, that's so cool. When we do our communication training to go right along with that, how often when we listen, are we formulating our response as the person's talking? And it's really hard to focus on what they're saying and have that, quick response in your mind. We as humans, for whatever reason, really hate silence. And, if I ask somebody a question, they're formulating their answer before the question's even done, which again, I get it. It's hard not to. but I'm practicing right along with you to listen and let that sentence have a period and even some space between listening to and answering, because it's really awkward. Silence is awkward for people. So they quick want, oh, boom, they always want to do that, which usually means that they are not listening because they're formulating that response. So that's fantastic wisdom for today. So the fun question is, JR, is if what's one thing that you feel comfortable sharing that most people wouldn't know about you?
I celebrated Monday, which was yesterday, in my pajamas till like 11. I was intentionally, I chose to be in my pajamas almost the whole day. How about that?
Well, I'll tell you what, in today's world, you can be on a podcast, and if people don't know where you are, what you look like, we put ours on YouTube just so that, if you want to put a name with a face, you can. But oh my gosh, that's like, thanks for sharing that. Was Cupcake okay with that?
Well, Cupcake had to hit the gym early, but me and my son were having a contest. Although he won, he was in pajamas still too.
A contest to see who could be in their pajamas the longest. Oh my gosh.
Right.
I could probably turn that into days if I needed to, JR, because nowadays what pajamas can be anything. So that's awesome. Well, every week we know that we connect with at least one person. Usually it's a lot more, but there's probably one or more people listening right now that this really resonated with them, whether it's the mentor piece, whether it's the business growth piece, whether it's audit who you hang out with, So I just want that person to, rather than jump onto their next podcast, rather than get, off the equipment that they were just on and jump into something else, to really sit with what was said today. And if it resonates with you, I just want to encourage you to do something with it. And probably the first thing to do would be to reach out to JR. So, JR, if somebody wants to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I'll tell you what, I would say that listening to the show resultsleader.fm, since I mean, you probably want to jump to more podcasts. I'm not on that. I mean, it's all about my guests. I'm listening, just so you guys know. I barely
There you
talk.
go.
But you can find me all over social, Riverathan, Riverathan, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, all the same. But really, I think that the best thing that you can do is go to the Positive Polarity podcast and leave a rating and review. Tell Dave that this made a difference to you. Let him know.
That's awesome. Yeah, we love seeing that. We love hearing that it is affecting people. Obviously, you're the same. You're an author, so there's books out there as well. So again, I just want to say thank you. Really thank you personally, because I don't usually get called out on stuff, and so I really appreciate when that happens. And when I write things down, now I have to do something with them. So now I got to do something with this comparison trap that you found of mine. So thank you for doing that. Not really, but thank you. Wasn't anticipating it, but you know what? I love to be challenged, and I love to get into that growth zone, and it has to be by way of the fear zone. So it'd be easy for me to justify and say that's not me, but you know what? It totally was. So if nobody gained anything today out of this, JR, I totally did, but I'm guessing that there's a lot of people in that same trap. And so again, find JR, thank him for his work, see how he can help you. And again, I just appreciate that you've found your niche and you're making your mark, and can't wait to learn more from you.
Brother, thank you for having me on the show. It was an absolute pleasure.